Hey, cuz.
Hello. Oh,
Look
we're
at
rolling.
you.
We're off.
Oh, well, I mean, it's turning over, but the beauty
yeah.
is that you can edit.
That's
so
true.
Have you ever filmed a podcast before? You haven't, have you?
Not like this. No, not properly. I've done like Zoom ones and stuff like that, but no, not of this jack scale.
Jack scale.
Yeah.
Oh, you're starting to give me a reputation. How do you feel?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good. Looking forward to doing this. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. We're here to talk about making, and you're a maker. How are you a maker?
How am I a maker? Music, basically. Primarily in the form of a band, and as a ghostwriter, and that's how I'm a maker. But I do other creative things that aren't strictly making, like performing and sessioning and that kind of thing. But yeah, making music and playing live. It's my thing, really. Yeah.
And where do you get your inspiration?
God. My inspiration, what? Just for making stuff? Oh, I mean, that's how long you got. Like, that's an impossible question.
That's why we're here.
It's an impossible question. I mean, I guess I can't think of a specific, like, a moment where I was like, I want to make stuff, but I've always liked making things. As far as I can remember, as far as my memory really goes back to when I was a kid. As you know, surrounded by artifacts and singers and painters and filmmakers.
Makers.
Yeah, makers. We are kind of sort of destined, I guess, in some way to do something creative. Both my parents were singers, but my dad only really got into making music later on in his life. So my desire to compose music kind of just came from the fact that I loved music and I loved listening to singers and bands and rappers and just all kinds of stuff growing up. And then I eventually sort of fell more into rock and metal, and then I sort of fell out of that and then back into it. And now I would just say right now I wouldn't say as an adult I have a specific band or artist that I'm like, that's my main inspiration. I just like music. I know that's a really boring answer. But what inspires me? I don't know. I've been kind of questioning that myself recently, because I guess another way of asking what inspires someone is what motivates them to do creative shit. And I'm not really sure at the moment.
Well, the beauty
actually
and the helpful nature of having conversations like this is to share them.
Yeah.
And it to be an open and explorative chat. And for people hopefully to witness that and gain from that, as well as us both gaining from it. The more I do this, the more I realise that the reason that I'm doing this is because I'm interested in growing and interested in...
What does that mean?
Well, interested in understanding the psychology of others.
Right.
So that I can get more to the stage where I know what it is that I want to say. Because really it's about saying something. And
Do you
so...
think?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I agree.
Okay.
So saying something.
I'll ask you this question then.
Yeah.
What do you hope people notice about your work?
Oh, I don't know anymore. I don't know. I think, I don't really know how to answer that, because it's something I'm thinking about a lot recently anyway. I think it would be naive and a bit of a lack of, it would be a sort of willful, intelligent ignorance to not just admit that anyone who's a maker or a creative isn't so because they have an ego. I think that's where it starts, because people, I don't think there's anyone who makes stuff whose soul isn't a little bit crushed when they aren't recognized for doing so. Whether it's, you know, having legions of fans of people who buy every painting you do, or buy every t-shirt your band releases, or listens to every song you release on Spotify. Or, I mean, for some people it's about the recognition of the masses. And for some people it's just to be recognized by the top 10 people that they are they hold in high regard, creatively speaking. But it depends. It's different for everyone. Everyone wants to have a pat on the back, I think. And I think it's interesting because when I do ghostwriting, this is like a client thing. So someone will hit me up, which means they recognize that I'm good at what I do, like what I do, and they want some of it. So they're paying me to give them my creation to pass it off ultimately as their own. And in some ways you could say that's a compliment, that's recognition. But as a younger, well, not that much younger, like a few years ago, as a younger man, because I'm only not that old yet, I went through a period where I was ghostwriting a lot, like for weeks on end, and a lot of work coming through. And it was quite satisfying all of a sudden making money from metal. All of us, my ability to make breakdowns and riffs on drop tune guitars was, giving me a decent amount of money out of nowhere suddenly. But then I really kind of fell out of love with doing it. At first I was, this is fun, this is exciting, this is new, this is not something I've done. I've only ever written my band stuff. And then suddenly I'm writing for other people. And there was something about that was a little bit soul destroying. And I still do it. Now I'm just a bit more selective about who I do it with. If I enjoy it, enjoy the process, enjoy the result. And namely, really, the people I write with outside of my own endeavors are people I either know or I'm close with or I have some kind of vested interest in. But it's got very little to do with money for me because it doesn't. I realized the jobs I've had, whether it was sessioning or ghostwriting where I got paid, meant less to me than some opportunities where I got nothing. But the experience was fucking great. I mean, my favorite experiences on like the road, especially touring, like on playing gigs and stuff, was about the connections I made and what those things led to. Like I just did last October, I did a tour where I was sessioning for an American band, and they wanted me because they're a big fan of, two of them at least were big fans of my band. So that made me feel nice, and it did definitely make me lean into wanting to do it more because I was like, all right, people who want to work with me, so I want to work with them. It was that simple. And, out of it, I gained some new mates, some people I'll get to go visit and hang out or would want to come see me perform next time I'm playing in America or something. And I think a lot of people would say that you have to, especially with like alternative music, like heavy music, you've got to love doing it because it's very hard to make a career out of it. It's very hard to make a career that you can live off and make money from. And you do it because you fucking love doing it. And one of the best parts of being in a touring band is most of the time you meet lots of amazing people from different sides of the world, different life experiences, different everything. And there's this unifying thing that you all have in common, which is playing gigs and being sick at it. And, whether it's looking great on stage, playing really well at the same time, doing like amazing vocals, the sound being really good and you sounded really tight that night, and the camaraderie of being on the road with, 20, 30 of the same people for weeks on end. You kind of build like a little family, and you build all these little families on every tour you do. And then it then means, these little families, they're these little friendship circles and these people that you feel really attached to and close to, but you might never speak to or rarely speak to because like there's this band there's a band that my band Shields toured with, and it's okay if I fuck this up. There's a band called Kingdom of Giants. My band Shields toured with them. And now whenever they come to the UK or if I'm in America, usually one of us, I'll hit up like their drummer, Truman or something. I'll be like, mate, I'm in town. And then we'll hang out. We'll go get a drink. If we're in San Francisco, we'll go smoke a spliff. Or if he's playing in London, we'll try and go get some food. And we'll catch up and we'll have great conversation. And then I might not speak to him for months, maybe longer. The connection and the memories attached to our friendship is just about the fact that we went on tour together and had a great time. And that's it. And then so much happens in between. Like, I think the last time I saw those guys, I'd gotten married and divorced and they had no idea. But it didn't matter. I don't care that they didn't know because there's plenty of things happening in their life that I'm not aware of. It's interesting. It's very interesting actually how No one actually, if you're not in a band, it's kind of hard to understand. Like my ex-partner never quite understood how I knew so many people and thought I was a bit of a weirdo. And she's like, why have you have all these friends and I feel like I'm not involved in your life because I don't know these friends. It's like, well, you've not met over 100 people, all of which you would call friend, all of which you would let crash on your couch, all of which, you know, you'd sort out like a home cooked meal if they're on the road and they need somewhere to crash. Like it's a weird sort of emotionally attached but physically detached community. It's very strange. It's cool though. I love it.
Who has offered you the most useful career advice?
First name that jumps to mind is a friend of mine called Ozzy. He's often who I go to for advice about things, especially about like more logistical business sort of end of the spectrum of being in music and being a creative and knowing how to talk to people. And I mean, being creative, it's very easy to get emotionally attached to everything you do, but ultimately it's an industry, the music industry. And so there is a business element to it, and business is cold. Business is not personal, but therefore the language and the way in which you converse and communicate with people needs to be like you're talking about a product rather than, you know, my band that I'm so emotionally attached to and means the world, and you know, we're going to make it one. No one gives a fuck about your stupid band. Like, it's a business at the end of the day. And I think Ozzy has often said, you know, that it's often reminded me of that in various ways. But a specific piece of advice, I'm not sure. Nothing's coming to my mind right now. I mean, I've just kind of fumbled and bumbled my way through it and made mistakes. I've gone, oh fuck, I won't do that again. I guess the best advice pertaining to like being creative, like creative advice, I don't know, there's a few people and they're both called George, funnily enough. One was George Christie, who sadly is no longer here, who was briefly a member of my band Shields before he died and was my friend before that. And he was I wouldn't say he was a genius, but I would say he was creatively intelligent and incredibly switched on and like an absolute scholar, basically, of what he did. I don't know. I don't really believe in the term genius. I don't really understand it. I think it's a bit wishy-washy, dick-sucky, to be honest. And the other George, so George Christie, he did to a much larger extent, a bit of what I do now, which he was a composer and a ghostwriter and wrote for metal bands and country artists and video games and all kinds of things. And he was going to write this book, which he never got to write. And he had these like 7 creative tenets, and I'm not going to remember what they are, but it was like, he broke music making into like 7 elements. And I think it was like tone, texture, harmony, melody, rhythm, and 1 or 2 others. I can't fucking remember. But I remember him explaining, you know, I used to get writer's block a lot. And I used to have a little writing room just over there, and he had one just above mine. And I was writing songs for Shields and I'd get stuck, and he'd be like, what are you stuck with? And I'm like, I've got this riff, man, but I've no idea where to go with it. And he'd be like, all right, so what are you doing? I'm just sitting here playing guitar, trying to write a new riff or like a new chord pattern. I was like, well, why don't you just put down the guitar and write on a piano? Why don't you just write a drum part? Why don't you just try and write a vocal melody? Why don't you just write lyrics? Like, stop beating yourself over the head with the guitar and just approach it from a different angle, which sounds so basic, but I think a lot of people get stuck in, they have written songs in one way and that's how they always do it. And then they're just doomed to repeat themselves and get lost in the insanity of repetition and the comfort of that repetition. And they're like, well, that works, I'm just going to keep doing that. But then they never make anything interesting again.
And it sounds like you've mastered that now.
No, no one's mastered anything. No, definitely not. Because a lot of creation is happy accidents. And I guess getting good at having a formula or a method is about understanding that happy accidents happen and how do you generate more opportunities for those, I think. But the other good advisor of mine would be a different George, who's happily still alive, called George Lever. And George he's sort of moving out of this now, but for the longest time he's been a music producer and engineer and mixer and masterer. And he has basically worked on everything I've done as a solo artist with Kubrick, and he's going to be mixing the New Shields album, and he's mixed a couple singles for us already. And he is very, very, very methodical and very analytical, similar to Other George as well, funnily enough. And this was good. Something that's always stuck with me that he said is, most of the time, and he works with people all the time, different bands and bands who are just starting out as well, but have a bit of money, but haven't quite figured out what their sound is. He's very good at like helping people craft their vision before they even realize what it is yet. Because he thinks it all comes down to, with music especially, and maybe all art, but he thinks it all comes down to feeling, ultimately. You know, I think most people, when they start a band, they have a favorite band, or they have a feeling that they want to recreate others that they experienced when they first listened to, I don't know, a Paramore album or a Slipknot album or a Beatles record, or, you know, whether it was excitement or if it was anguish, and for me it was excitement. I'd hear something and go, fuck, that's sick. I want to make that. I want to make something I want to make my own thing that generates the same result, that same feeling. And George, you know, said to me about, what did he say? He said something like, it was more like focusing on the feeling rather than trying to replicate what other people had made. Like, what do you want this to make you feel? What do you want it to make someone else feel? But really, I think you should focus on, how does it make you feel? Because I don't think trying to make something that's going to make people feel a certain way is not going to have as close to the results you want if you just focus on it making you feel that way. Staying close to like authenticity rather than focus on replicating things that you like. And that's not to say you can't replicate and be influenced. Replicating and influence aren't necessarily the same thing, in my opinion. They're cousins, maybe. But yeah, focusing on, you know, I want to write a song that makes me feel sad. I want to write a song that makes me feel heartbroken or confused, or that invokes something. And focusing on that, and then worrying about whether it's going to be a metal song or a pop song or a rap, hip hop, grimy drill song, or if it's going to be classical or sort of a synthesized electronic EDM opera, whatever you want it to be. Like, that comes later. Because you, like with metal, one thing I've said to a few people is anyone can make a heavy song. The basic ingredients for making heavy, it's a bit like saying, you know, anyone can make a bowl of pasta. Pasta in the water, tomato sauce, cheese, done. But what cheese are you using? You know, what type of tomatoes are you using? How much seasoning have you put in it? What kind of pasta you're using? Is it al dente? Is it what's the one when it's really soft? Is it not al dente?
Horrible.
Is it horrible? Yeah. But maybe you want horrible, you know, when it comes to music. Sometimes horrible is good. Anyone who can play guitar and in a metal band can make something heavy, but not anyone can make a fantastic fucking song. And making a song is not the same as being good at pop music or good at heavy music. I actually really fundamentally believe you can make any song into any genre, because you have it's just sort of, it's notes and it's chords and it's harmony and it's melody and it's rhythm. But what's the rhythm played on? What's the lead line played on? Is it sung? Is it a guitar solo? Is it a harp? Is it a saxophone? You know, if I wrote 4 chords on the lead line and a drum beat, and I did it on like a really dead 70s kit with an analog Moog synthesizer and a saxophone, that's going to sound very different if I had double kick drums, an 8-string drop E guitar, and a metal vocalist who's vaguely touching the pitch but basically just screaming his head off. But it's the same tempo. It could be maybe not even the same tempo, but fundamentally it's the same notes and rhythms, and everything else can change, and it can sound like 2 different songs. I've done this. I've cheated before, where I've written a song where I was like, this. It was like there was some pop song. It wasn't even like a massive artist, but I remember hearing it on SoundCloud when I was 14. I was like, this is sick. I can't remember what it was called. It was I wish I could credit this person. Anyway, but I remember hearing this song, and I took the chords, changed the tempo, and put it on a heavy guitar. But then that inspired my own ideas out of that. And then the song sounded nothing like the thing that originally influenced it, but just having, okay, even if it's just the structure, you know, intro, chorus, verse, double chorus, finish, just having like that framework to go off that you could have technically stole off someone else, but you can turn it into your own just as a starting point. I think music is basically who can plagiarize the best and get away with it. 100%, actually, definitely.
Blank page.
Yeah.
How do you start?
For someone else, easy, because someone else will give me parameters. They'll give me a breakdown of what they want. For example, they'll say, hey, a band come to me and say, hey, we want a song that sounds like Architects. We want it to be on 7 strings in this tuning. We want it to have an upbeat chorus and a really epic, heavy breakdown to finish the song.
You've got a brief.
Yeah, a brief. My blank page is this: open up Logic, load in some drum samples, 1 mono track with a basic amp sim, and I will just, without much thought, just start playing and just start programming drums. And in about 6 hours, 3 to 6 hours, depending on how I'm feeling that day, I'll have a song. I'll have just some drums and a guitar, and I'll have the skeleton. Very, very, very basic, not listenable, but it will mean something to me. And then so that'll be sort of one session, and then the next session, the next day, would be me tidying it up and going through each section and making it good, basically. So, okay, here's the idea for that riff. Now let's polish it up. Let's add more palm mutes and more slides and more whatever, and I'll just develop and further the riff and further the riff, further the riff until I like it, and then I'll move on to the next section, and if it still makes sense to the riff prior, I'll just rinse and repeat that process until it's done. But in all honesty, it can chop and change. This sounds so wanky, but basically I feel like most of the time I'm just discovering the idea rather than creating it. Because as you're coming up with things, your brain you sort of come up with an idea and your brain wants to hear something. That's kind of what happens is you start an idea, and then as the idea develops, your brain, or my brain anyway, just sort of tells me what it wants to hear next. I've written something maybe really slow and dramatic, and then I think, okay, now I want it to explode and speed up. And I just sort of follow that train. I'm following the train of thought until it's completed. But a blank page for myself, I don't know if there's no answer for that really. It depends. Like, for example, I just finished a song yesterday at 4 a.m. A few days ago, my computer crashed and on Logic, and it got stuck on something, and it was just giving me this horrible like this horrible. My computer just fucked it basically, and it was producing this awful, horrible, distorted, synthesized sound, but it was kind of creating these weird textures and harmonies, and I was like, this sounds horrible, but I can kind of like hear chords in this. And so I took my iPhone and I just recorded a voice note of my speakers blaring out this horrible noise, and I recorded like 30 seconds of it, and then I realized that the fucking speakerphones and iPhones are pretty goddamn good actually. So I had this pretty clean sample of this horrible synthesized distorted mess, and then I loaded that into Logic last night, and off the back of that, I could hear all these notes and these chords, and I kind of was listening to it, and I kind of picked out what I could hear was like a root note from the chord. And then I loaded up like a really simple 808 bass, started programming drums, and then suddenly I had ideas for lyrics, typed out like 3 paragraphs of lyrics. And in the nature of the fact that I'd recorded this original sample on my voice note, instead of then recording the vocals with a mic, I just used my voice note thing on my iPhone. So I had my headphones on with click rolling around, not even to music, just sort of badly rapped, because I'm not a rapper, so I wasn't really trying to rap, but I wanted it to be sort of spoken word and gritty and sad because the chords were so intense. And I just spoke the lyrics into it, airdropped it into Logic, moved it around, did some fun EQing and distorting and whatever else and panning, built the rest of the beat, and from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. I had a finished song. So sometimes it just happens, and then other times I can spend months on one song because I'm so emotionally, because I had no real emotional attachment to that tale I just told about this weird sample. I was just like, this is fun. I was just sort of making shit. It was just flowing out of me, because I didn't even, is this going to be for Kubrick or is this going to be for Shield? I don't know, I'm just going to make something. And it came out fucking great. But then other times where I'm like, I really want to make something that makes me feel this specifically. I want to make something that sounds like this. I can slave over it and feel like I'm getting nowhere for weeks. It really depends. I would actually, if I was to give someone advice about creativity in music, is don't get too attached. Your attachment will cost you time. It will cost you results. Just make it. Just make some cool shit and not worry about, is it sound enough? Is it cool enough? Is it trendy enough? Does it even sound like stuff I've written before? It doesn't matter. Just make shit. Because I've had this before where I wanted, like with my band's first album, I wanted to make this really amazing metalcore album. And it took 4 years to write 12 songs. It's ridiculous now that I think about it. And Shields, who have been in this studio now for the last 5 months, we wrote, recorded, and engineered and produced a whole album in 5 months. And the difference was for me is I'm emotionally invested, but I'm not attached to any one idea. I just keep going. I just keep pushing through it. And I don't try to catastrophize or obsess over any detail too much, because you can always revise details. You can always just go back. Oh, I kind of repeated myself a bit here. I'll change that one thing, you know.
What makes you envious?
Envious. Good question. On a surface level, more so in the past than now, but I'm still guilty of this, is other people's success. But I'm not really envious, but that's not really envy. That's more just me feeling like failing to ignore the fact that actually I should be trying harder. Perhaps maybe being too tough or not tough enough on myself for being busier or making more stuff, as it were, creating more songs, seizing more opportunities. I try my very best to be reliable, and I think for the most part I am. I'm not perfect, no one is. But what makes me envious? Gosh, I mean, I guess, yeah, there is always a small part of me that sometimes, well, I don't know, this is the thing, like, I don't see bands, for example, bands who are doing bigger shows than my band are, or have overtaken me, whatever that means. I don't really ever see that and go, oh, fuck them, or they don't deserve that. I do sometimes see bands do well, and I'm not quite sure why they're doing well, because I subjectively think they're dog shit. But I also am super aware that that's just my opinion, and I'm not right or wrong. That's just what I think about that band. And, you know, there's a real case to be made that in those circumstances I am wrong, because people love what they do. So fuck me, literally. I don't know. I definitely experience envy, but I don't know if I have a particular chip on my shoulder about envy. But it's a part of the human experience, which I've definitely had. I think it's, whenever I'm envious of other people, it's more about how I'm feeling about myself than other people.
What do you do with it?
I can tell you what I try to do with it. I try to use it as energy. And I try and remember that someone else's success does not determine my own. And success is also totally personal. It's very hard not to base one's standard of success on what other people are doing.
So what does yours look like?
I have no idea. Not sure, actually. Really not sure. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I don't currently have a goal to be the best at anything. I just like doing what I do. I don't feel the need to be the best guitarist or the best vocalist, because I don't really think that exists. You can technically be the best. You can play the kick drums faster than anyone. You can shred harder than anyone. But those things are very, very cool, and they go a long way to help with creativity. But there are people who are virtuoso players but terrible composers. That does exist. There are some people who are players, not musicians, I think, and they're fantastic players, but they couldn't come up with an original idea if they tried. And that might sound quite egotistical of me, because I'm not saying that all my ideas are the most original either. Although I do strive for I want to make stuff that I like, making things that make people go, fuck, I've not heard anything like that before. Or even if it's not, fuck, I've never heard that before, just fuck. That's cool. But yeah, definition of success, I don't know, man. Who knows? I really don't know.
Is there anything you regret not doing due to fear?
Yes. But that's Yeah. I don't know if that's so much to do with being a maker. Well, maybe it is. I regret staying with my wife. I regret staying with my wife and allowing my naivety and low self-esteem to ruin opportunities I had in front of me, definitely, which is ultimately on me. And I don't actually ultimately put on my wife, even though I do have resentment toward my ex-wife. I do have resentment towards her for that. But ultimately, it's my choice. So that is on me.
What makes you stressed?
In a creative aspect? I mean, I've got lots of answers, but I don't think that got anything to do with being a creative.
Well, just let it out. This is about growth.
Yeah, growth. Okay. Right. Okay. What stresses me out? Sounds really wanky and deep of me, but I guess the passage of time. Yeah.
Okay, mortality.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, but also not dying, but how I die. I don't really care. I don't think I care about. I've never had a deep concern about like legacy, which some people would say that makes me quite feminine in my nature. Not my words. But yeah, I don't like because that's quite like a masculine thing, isn't it? It's like, legacy. What are you leaving behind? What are you? How did you change the world and all this kind of thing? But what scares me? I don't know. I've always lived very attached to how other people are feeling and quite detached from how I'm feeling. So I don't really know. Maybe I've got some growing to do. Probably.
We're talking about legacy.
Yeah.
What do you know about your distant ancestors beyond your great-grandparents?
Not much. I know that we have some descendancy from a Red Indian prostitute and a Portuguese sailor somewhere, don't we? Deep in our ancestry.
Yeah.
Remember my dad telling me about that. I'm like, thanks, Dad. I know that we are related to both Jews and Nazis. That's fun. Figure that one out.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that hard to figure out.
That's not that hard to figure out. It's
German,
nothing to do with it.
German, because German, yeah, exactly.
Because Hitler.
Yeah, because Hitler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only reason it's weird.
That's true.
Yeah.
But it's still funny. But no, beyond, sort of like our great grandfather Jack and Gert, and I can't remember my great grandparents' names on my dad's side. Not much, honestly.
Do you know what they did?
My great grandparents. I know that on this side of the family, our great grandfather was a doctor. But that's it. I don't know much, honestly. Maybe I should. No one told me. I guess I could have asked, but no one's really ever told me.
So I guess that, on the topic of legacy, it's interesting to think about how quickly we'll be forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because you were saying about, people have said that it's feminine of you to not be thinking about legacy and not, for it to not matter to you.
Well, because what should my why should my great grandkids give a fuck about what I was doing when their great grandfather was 30? They've got their own lives. They've got stuff to be focused on, life to be lived. They have to live their lives, not mine. They don't have to worry about what I was doing. I don't think it matters. Ultimately, like there's nothing wrong with caring about your family's legacy and where you came from. It can be really interesting, it can be inspiring, it can be fascinating. I mean, fuck, man, like our grandfather was a cult film director, and so that's pretty interesting, but I only really figured it out when I was like 16, 17, 18, and it's not really something that I'm not like not proud of being related to Stanley Kubrick. But also, so what? It doesn't say anything. It doesn't have any. It tells you nothing about who I actually am. It doesn't tell you that. It doesn't mean I'm a better person or a good person or a genuinely virtuous person. it doesn't mean I'm the opposite of those things either. It doesn't say anything necessarily. You know, I try to be a good person because that's in my nature. I think it's in most people's nature to try their best. It is for the most part. So yeah, legacy is, you can choose for it to be important, and that's fine. I just choose not to. You know, the only legacy I will care about will be if I have kids one day, and making sure that they are happy, independent, autonomous, and know how to respect themselves and respect other people, and how to know when they're not being respected and how to navigate that big time. That's, you know, that I'll care about. And I guess that's legacy to an extent, isn't it? You know, this is super lame incoming, but to quote a video game I played way too much of recently, Spider-Man, if you help one person, you help everyone. And I actually think that's pretty profound. I think it's kind of fucking true, actually. You know, there was there's a book I can read, but I don't read because I can't stare at a page long enough to focus, so I listen.
I can read.
Yeah, I can physically read, but I'm not very good at reading books because I can't like stay focused on the words. So I listen to audiobooks rather than read them. And so I listened to a book on the recommendation of a good close family friend called The Four Agreements. I'm not going to remember all of those agreements right now, but a big part of that book's message that sunk in with me was about the power of the word, and how we should think of words and just speech and rhetoric and logos and language as magic. And, you know, how much of a profound effect your words can have on other people, even people that you just meet in passing. I think it's very important when you're going day to day out into the world, just to not be a cunt, just to be a nice person. When you go into a petrol station and you're buying a chocolate bar and a can of drink and cigarettes or whatever, just smile at the poor sod who's working this job that you wouldn't want to work, you pretentious asshole, and be thankful someone is, and be nice to them. Smile. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you so much. How you doing? Makes a big difference. I mean, I don't know how many people will just accidentally lock eyes with someone in the street or in Tesco or wherever when they're out and about, and you'll sort of lock eyes and you move on. I try and make a real conscious effort if I do lock eyes with someone just in passing, just to smile. Cost absolutely nothing, and chances are that's just going to make that person have a little boost of something good, a little nice moment.
In what areas of your life are you happy to be good enough?
Say that again.
In what areas of your life are you happy to be good enough?
Am I happy to be good enough? What do you mean?
So perfection is there. In what areas of your life, different aspects of your life, are you happy to not be hitting 10 out of 10?
I kind of wish I crushed at all of them, but I definitely don't. What ones am I happy not to crush at? I don't know. Because I think we all wish that we were better at the things that we care about, the things that we do that we care about that we're not amazing at. We all wish we were better at, but we don't always. We have a finite. Everyone has a finite amount of energy to put into all these things. There's always going to be a cost. I always find when I'm at my healthiest, I'm my least productive with work. When I'm most productive with work, I'm at my least healthiest. That's the balance I can never strike. I've been crashing at work recently, but I haven't gone to the gym in like a month. But when I'm going to the gym every day and getting really strong and eating steak and chicken and eggs and veggies all the time, I find that my work really suffers. I don't really know why that is, because I've always thought, you know, healthy body, healthy mind. And actually find my mind...
That's what we're told.
Well,
certainly.
What's the guy from Modern Wisdom? Chris Williamson. One thing he said in different conversations is that his belief, and I don't disagree with him, is that mental health is downstream of physical health. I think that is true, but I think it's a balance and it's different for everyone, because I think our bodies and our souls, for lack of a better word, get kind of acclimatized to the type of lives that we've become comfortable in. I was not a sporty kid. I was not athletic, but discovering the gym and like lifting heavy weights and realizing what it's like to experience lifting 180 kilograms off the ground, it's a pretty fucking cool feeling. That might not be a lot of weight for some people, but for me, that's a lot of weight. But then, you know, people go on to do that professionally and their whole life becomes about eating and going to the gym, and the rest of the time they just chill because they're recovering. So if I'm spending time building strength and focusing on my diet and counting my calories and drinking this many liters of water and taking all my supplements and I find that the thinking about all that stuff takes up a lot of my mental energy. And then when it comes to sitting down at my laptop and working, sometimes I'm a bit like, oh, I can't really think about anything else, which maybe just means I have a limited bandwidth. That might be an ADHD thing. I know some people don't think it's real, but I think it is because of my lived experience. There's no such thing as lived experience. It's just experience. But I don't know. I wish I was better at balance in general. I wish I had balance down. Because I think a lot of creative types, maybe just all people actually, they think that you are maximizing efficiency and productivity by being on time all the time and by being super on it with your schedule, when actually sometimes having an extra 7 minutes on your walk to work or whatever, or, you know, taking a little bit longer to, you know, like if you buy yourself like a can of Monster, it might not be the healthiest thing, but just take an extra moment to enjoy your nice drink that you've treated yourself to, rather than like, oh, I'm having a can of Monster because I need energy, I didn't sleep enough. Just pace yourself, be easier to yourself, which doesn't mean don't be easy on yourself whilst being hard on yourself. Like, hold yourself to a high standard, but don't fucking destroy yourself if you eat a biscuit because you're meant to be eating steak and eggs that day, or, you know, you wanted to edit a full song of vocals, but you only managed to get halfway through it because you were losing focus and the quality of your work started to go down. I mean, that's one thing I've noticed, is that if I do lots of little mini sessions, I will get more done by then in terms of work, like on a Logic session when have Logic open and I'll do half an hour burst of work, and then I'll play a match on chess.com for 20 minutes, and then I'll go back for another half an hour, then I'll stop for 20 minutes and maybe go for a walk, another half an hour, stop for another 20 minutes, you know, call a friend, maybe then stop for an hour and then go back and then do an hour's work. Whereas if I just sit there and try and be like, right, I'm going to solidly work for 4 hours, then take 45 minutes and do another 4 hours, I will get nothing done. Nothing. Basically, I'll just get so overwhelmed. I'm just not going to do anything. And then I'll just stare into space or, you know, watch television or just fuck about in some way. It's hard. God, I think that's one of the hard things about being creative on your own, not being employed or having like working for like a company where there's like a goal in mind and you're part of a task force where you're just sort of all, well, you're, I don't know, like developing a video game and your job is to get this done. And if you don't get it done, Susie can't do her thing because Kevin fucked up his thing earlier. And so there's this sort of like pressure and this camaraderie. But when you're working on something by yourself, which primarily I do, I have my band, which I do most of the writing with Joe. But even then, we're sort of writing songs separately and then chipping in with each other's ideas. It's still me, I have to motivate myself. There's no boss to be afraid of. There's just self-disappointment and crushing self-esteem issues if you don't get it done.
Tell me about self-esteem.
What do you want to know? Self-esteem.
Your journey with it.
I was having a conversation with my dad about self-esteem the other day. I didn't really know what self-esteem meant, but basically my dad was saying, well, you know, if you hold someone in higher esteem, you hold them in high regard. So having low self-esteem basically means you don't value yourself. Oh God, I could talk about this for a long time. I really could. Yeah. Your question was how's my self-esteem doing?
Tell me about your
How are
journey.
you feeling?
Tell me about your journey.
My journey.
Self-esteem.
My value used to be based on, and I think this is probably true for most people, was based on validation from other people. And, you know, validation from other people has its place of importance, but I care now far more what, you know, the people I actually care about think of me, rather than my, you know, 5,000 followers on Instagram, most of whom I don't really know. Even if I met them once in person, we followed each other. Like, God, it used to all be about, you know, how big my band was how I determined my worth. And then when I didn't have my band for a period, I felt very depressed because suddenly I felt like I had no identity. And I was Sam from Shields in my mind rather than Sam who does Shields. It's two separate things. And now my this is an interesting one. So I just got offered a tour, a session gig, very well paid, in America, Canada, 6 weeks long. And there was a time when even the thought of an offer like that would send me bouncing off the walls with utter excitement and just, oh, this is the best thing ever. But I've been sort of feigning excitement externally to people I've been telling about it because I feel like that's the appropriate reaction. And actually, I feel quite indifferent about it. And, you know, fuck, I'm going to be earning very decent wage if I get the job. The only thing that's keeping me from the job is just a visa thing at the moment. But assuming that all works out, I'll be getting paid a very decent amount, expenses paid, visas covered, flights covered, and I get to tour America for 6 weeks playing metal riffs and that's only come around because of the efforts I've put into myself through Shields and playing gigs. You know, this is what manifesting actually means. I've actually manifested opportunity by just doing shit and, you know, by making stuff and touring and doing what I love doing. And other people have recognized that I'm worth their time, worth their money to hire. So, and it's interesting, my esteem usually would have had a huge, you know, big top up, massive leveling up and feeling really good about myself and a bit cocky. And now I just sort of feel it. I am appreciative of it. I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity and even be presented with it, but it doesn't make me feel valuable. It doesn't make me, it doesn't affect my esteem. And I'm not really sure why. I think it could easily have something to do with age. I'm 30, not 20, maybe 20-year-old Sam, because I've done this for a while. I've toured, not the whole world, but I've toured all over Europe. I've been all over America once already, in Canada. I've done countless laps of Europe and the UK. I've done the tiny toilet tours playing to no people after driving 18 hours. I've also done the 37-hour trip to go play in front of 1,000 people, play in front of 5,000 people. I've done some really cool shit. I'm not saying that in a self-sucky way. It's just, I'm just stating a fact. So it's not as new to me anymore. So that could easily be why. So maybe it's got nothing to do with my esteem. I'm not sure. I think my esteem took a massive hit when my marriage ended. I think it took a massive hit because I poured all of my energy into prioritizing my marriage with an impossible person, and that person then left that relationship, started to rewrite history as we got divorced, saying I was the one who left. And I was just completely, you know, I wasn't heartbroken when the relationship ended because I think I'd fallen out of love with her before I'd realized. I think I had this painful relief that came with a heavy topped side of shame and sort of regret and guilt about how I treated other people whilst I was in that relationship. And that's had a massive knock-on effect to my creativity, actually, and my energy to get up and go. But, you know, my relationship ended, over a year ago now, and it took a solid 9 months to sort of emerge out of a sort of cocoon of depression and no self-esteem. And now I don't know, I feel like, in some ways I feel like I'm starting again. And I'm very lucky that I'm not really starting again because I've got my family and I've got my friends who ultimately all are just happy that I'm not with that fucking bitch anymore. Christ, so happy. And you feel so stupid. So fucking stupid. God damn it. Yeah, so stupid. God, well, here's how my self-esteem's doing.
Tell me about from a self-esteem and an emotional perspective rather than a practical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to that relationship?
Well, I guess it's very similar to what I was just saying. Myself, my regard for myself was based on other people's regard for me. I had no regard for myself. And here comes along, ex-wifey, and who made me initially feel very good about myself and thought that I was in a band was really cool, even though she wasn't sort of from a musical background at all. And, we went through a powerful, horrible experience together that pushed us together. And then combine that with low self-esteem, no regard for himself, Sam that relies on other people for regard, and a young 20-year-old, quite traumatized young lady. And there we were. And then, everything unfolded and got worse and worse and worse and worse. So you asked me, sorry, I'll bring it back.
No, you're good. So what advice would you give your 30?
My what?
You're 30, aren't you?
Yeah.
So what advice would you give the 20-year-old you?
Stay focused. Stay fucking focused, man. Stop worrying about... You haven't got a girlfriend. Who cares? Stay focused. Stick with your friends. Keep making cool shit. Be good. Try your best knowing you won't always, but try your best. Try your best knowing you won't achieve your best always, but as long as you're trying. And whether you believe it or not, you deserve to like yourself. Probably. That's probably what I'd say to myself now.
That sounds pretty good to me. What advice do you have hoped to have followed by the time you're 40?
Oh, so you're like time traveling here a little bit.
Yeah.
So what advice do you think 40-year-old Sam would give me now? Nice. That's a spicy one. I don't know, because I don't know what fuck-ups I'm going to be making the next 10 years. I think 40-year-old Sam would probably say, patience. Forgive yourself. Patience, forgive yourself, and also stop fucking around. Just patience, stop fucking around.
With a goal of what? As we started this conversation.
Peace. Peace and just peace. And joy.
Personal peace.
Yeah, personal peace.
Not world peace.
I mean, I'd love that, but come on. Yeah, my own inner calm and peace. Yeah. If I can have that, I don't fucking care what else is going on.
So what's the goal?
Peace. That is the goal, man. Music is just something I do. It's just something I do. It's not who I am. It's a big part of who I am. But, the concept of identities right now is very annoying. And I'm not really sure what is healthy to identify with. Because if you identify too strong with something and then you can't do it one day, then who are you? So I try not to identify myself with things that I do. I try and identify with the kind of person. I try to identify with my actions and my rationale and my morality. That's who I am. Because I'd still be me if I wasn't doing music. Like I said to you the other day, I had this weird quarter-life crisis. I was like, I'm going to become a fireman. Don't know if you remember that. I'm going to do this. But I'd still be me. I don't suddenly stop being Sam because let's say music becomes a hobby and I go into a completely different industry.
I did. I did.
You did what? You didn't
went into a completely different industry.
Yeah, but you're still Jack. That's my point.
Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah,
exactly. But
that's my point. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
We're agreeing awkwardly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, of course, exactly. You did music for a long time, and now you make cool visual shit, whether it's documentaries or podcasts now or whatever else you get hired to do. But you're still Jack. You know, whether you had done your own personal growth and stayed with music, you'd still be this person. You'd be doing this to this level in music. That's exactly my point. Like, you're not...
I definitely wouldn't be, but...
Well, of course not, because that's why you're doing this. But if you had in an alternative universe, I feel you. But yeah, you're not your job. It's, you know, you're not even your passion. Your actions, I think, because your actions reflect who you are. You know, so hence why it was not good for me that I used to hold my regard for myself was based on the regard other people had on me because I was in a cool band.
So if you are not your achievements, what is your value?
Good question. Maybe this is why I've struggled with this in myself so much, because I don't even know how to answer that for myself. I really don't. And I think why you do things matters almost as much as what you do. For example, I had this idea that at my 30th birthday, I thought about saying something to everyone there, which I didn't do because then sadly my grandma started to die, so my 30th birthday didn't happen. But I was thinking, you know, I would make a little speech and say something nice to all my friends and you and everyone who was there, and about how much I appreciate them all. And especially in the wake of my marriage ending and being so absent from everyone who really matters to me and being absent from their lives. And I thought about making this little like nice speech, and then I decided I wasn't going to, because I realized why I was doing that, why I was sort of fantasizing about doing that was less about for my friends' benefit, for them to feel appreciated, and more about the reaction I was going to evoke, which was going to evoke an emotion in me. So in a roundabout weird way, I thought it'd be kind of a selfish thing to do. Even if I kept that very small selfish intention to myself, and it did have the consequence of making my friends feel touched and warm and nice, you know, it was enough that they were there.
That sounds incredibly reflective.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of that bullshit recently. Reflecting.
Well, doesn't sound like it's bullshit to you.
No, it's not, but it feels...
Because otherwise you would have done it.
Well, I didn't get a chance to not do it.
Sure.
Either.
But you talked yourself out of it anyway, in hindsight. Or before it.
Well, like I just started to think about, because, you know, what you do and why you do it. Maybe that's the 2 + 2 that equals 4 that one needs to think about when you're going to do something.
If you didn't make music, what would you do?
Good fucking question. I mean, right now, if, I don't know, I had a car accident, I fully recovered, but it meant I couldn't do music anymore because the music bit of my brain went, and I had to do something else. I would do something physical, actually. I have some kind of physical career, not like being an athlete, but I'd want to do something like, I think I might actually be a fireman. I know that sounds crazy, but I'd want to do something that was physically good for my health, and I'd want to do something that was simple, that meant I could just help people. Because I am too attached to the things I love doing to give that up, to go and do something like that. And I don't think that necessarily makes me like a bad person. But, you know, I do think to myself sometimes that artistic people are inherently kind of selfish, because we're choosing to spend our life obsessing about getting really good at it, about doing something that is ultimately for us. You know, but at the same time, the amount of people that fucking love going to concerts and it's like the best experience, and they fall in love with your music and get great comfort from just spamming the same song a million times, that's putting good into the world. one might say it's not as important as like, oh my God, you saved someone from a burning car wreck, is not as amazing, but maybe it's amazing in its own way. I don't know, but I don't know how much my music has or hasn't touched people like that. I know there are people that have really loved my songs and have expressed that to me, and that is always gratifying, and I love hearing that. Makes me feel good, makes me feel nice, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But you know, what's the alternative? If I just gave up music and changed careers and became a, you know, philanthropic, humanitarian, goody two-shoes person, that's no shade on people who are those very amazing, wonderful people who do great things that help humanity at all. Would I actually do it very effectively, or would I just be resentful of the fact I'm starved of doing the thing I love doing?
Final question. So in what ways are you a bit mad?
I eat too fast.
You do eat like
very
an
fast.
absolute a bulldozer.
Mm-hmm. In what ways am I mad? I really enjoy. I don't have Tourette's. I feel like I have intellectual Tourette's. I just want to say the thing that I shouldn't say most of the time, and I don't usually say it, but sometimes I do. That's my I like saying things. I like being very. I have little fantasies sometimes about being social situations and saying really off the cuff things that are so off the cuff and sound insane, but undeniably true that people don't know what to say to it. Like, gotcha moments. Okay, here's an example of my madness. I think I've told you this before. I was at a gig 2 days after my relationship with my ex finished, in terms of when we separated, but still all pre-divorce. And I was sort of in a weird headspace where I was kind of just fine. I think I was in shock. The wave hadn't crashed down quite yet. But I was at this gig, and there was a guy who I know whose band were playing, and he was having, bless him, a bit of a meltdown because I think it had been quite a stressful tour. This was a tour date on a tour they were doing. And he was pretty pissed off at the rest of his band for every other reason, and he was feeling a bit disrespected, burnt out, overworked, and a bit hard done by. And he was genuinely upset, and me and his other bandmate and a couple of other people were staying with him, and he was just sort of letting it out a little bit and having a bit of a vent. It was a bit red in the face, almost a bit teary. And I could just see that I just could see how sad he was and struggling he was. And I just wanted to sort of snap him out of his sadness in that moment. So what I did is I slapped my hand on his back and I said, well, listen, bro, I know you're going through it right now, but it could be worse. Because my mum's dead, my dad's gay, my wife just left me. All true, by the way. And and the ridiculousness of putting my dad being gay up there with dead mum.
Yeah.
Because that was what I thought made it funny. and it worked, because the four of us that were standing there, there was a mixture of awkward silence, instant laughter, and someone just left. Yeah, that's one thing I'm good at, actually, is with a lot of things, I really just don't give a fuck what people think about me. Most people, I don't give a fuck. I care what you think, I care what my dad thinks, I care what my mate Joe thinks, I care what Ellie thinks, I care what Ozzy thinks, I care what George thinks. But most people, get fucked. Get fucked. You don't matter, sorry. Not to me. I'm sure there's people who care about you, and that's great, but fuck off. Thanks.
You're a legend, man.
Says you.
I value you greatly.
Same, bro.
And more than ever.
Same, truly.
So it's been so cool having you next door and just hearing you
of course.
get on and do your stuff. And
your viewership might not realise, but we've been next door for months, haven't we?
Yeah. We've been literally building our next chapters next door to each other.
We really have been.
It's super cool to be of the next generation of this big mad, situation that we have grown up in.
Yeah.
And to just be cracking on with it, the next people to come is epic. Thanks so much for coming on my
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
little venture.
Yes.
It's fun, isn't it?
Ta-da!
Good man.
Amazing.
Brilliant, mate.
Happy? Whoa! That has to stay in. Maybe I can start it off.